Hello and welcome back to another episode of Musings from the Mountains. My name is Zach Anderson alongside Keenan Cummings, and we have a special guest today. The editor of BearcatReport.com, Jason Stamm, joins us to talk a little bit Cincinnati football. Jason, we're glad to have you. Thank you for your time. And, a little bit of a renewed Big East rivalry on Saturday. So just first of all, give us your thoughts on Saturday's game to start out.
Yeah, I mean that was they had a few years there back and forth in the old Big East, not the current Big East, obviously, but yeah, I think it's one of those. I don't know if I'd call it necessarily a rivalry yet, but proximity wise, based on that brief history they had in the Big East, I think it's definitely one of those that could become one. And so that was why I was really sad to see this wasn't one of those protected rivalry games by the Big 12 when they released the schedule for the next few years. Seems to me like an obvious one. And, I think this is the first step in getting towards that direction. It's been a tough season for Cincinnati. They lost 7 games in a row there until the win at Houston. I think they're heading in a better direction. I don't know if it's yet to say the right direction just yet, but they're at least showing some progress. Whereas for a while there, it was just kind of like spinning their wheels.
One of the talking points from Neil Brown this week was, this team's their record is their record, but they played a lot better than their record suggests. Do you agree with that? And kind of what has been the issues for this team?
Yes and no. I think if you look at the statistical categories, and they've had multiple games where they've led in total yards, dominated time of possession, but it's those mistakes. I mean, there were about 4 or 5 games in a row where it's like anytime they would get close to the red zone, it's almost like mouse ran on the field and everybody's scared of it kind of thing. It's like they couldn't figure out what to do when it offense just stalled. They move it, they get, move the chains, they get down to about the 20, 30-yard line, and then they just stall out. A lot of that falls on Emory Jones. He's been one of the least efficient quarterbacks nationally, statistically, all season. They have, for the most part, stuck with him. They've worked in Brady Lichtenberg a little bit, but they've pretty well stuck with him. And of course, this is a guy who's a 2-time transfer grad student. He's nearing the end of his career here. You would think by now he wouldn't be making some of the mistakes he's made, but he's absolutely made them. So, I don't know, excuse me, if I would say they should have won those games or played better than the record. But they at least have shown some signs that maybe a typical 3-17 would not have shown at this point.
So Coach Brown mentioned this a little bit last night. The transition, just take me through the transition and what that's been like to the Big 12, because Coach Brown said there's obviously been some challenges. The record isn't indicative of what you guys have done in terms of playing close to teams, but what's the transition been like for the players and the coaches? How have they talked about that?
I think it's been good. It's been welcome, but it's been tougher than I think a lot of them realized. They were playing at a very, very high level the last few seasons under Luke Fickell. And we talked about it. I mean, this 2 years ago, they were in the college football playoff playing against Alabama. So as a program, this is a program that has had success, but they have a brand new coach who, I'll be honest, I don't think wowed a ton. It wasn't a wow hire by any stretch. I think there are plenty of Cincinnati fans you'll talk to who are not happy with that hire from the get-go. Because he did okay at Louisville and he did good at Appalachian State, but especially when you're used, Luke Fickell had them up on a pedal, towards the upper echelon, definitely in the group of 5. That run is a big reason why they're in the Big 12 now. And so I think in some ways, a lot of people thought they took a step back with Scott Satterfield. So going forward, recruiting wise has also been, I think, a little less than desired. If you look at, again, right before, they had a really, really good class in place before Luke Fickell left. They had multiple guys in the Rivals 250, 4-star guys, and now they've really dropped back off where they're recruiting a lot of 3-star, mid-level 3-star guys who, I think are good players, but they're not those players that are going to put you in the top of the Big 12 by any stretch. So I think they have their work cut out for them so far. And again, I don't think it's been nearly as easy on the football side. Basketball side's a totally different story. But on the football side, I don't think it's been nearly as easy a go as some people, administration-wise, fans, even somebody like Scott Satterfield thought it was going to be.
West Virginia dealt with that too. I mean, the one thing you noticed is maybe the depth. I mean, that's what, from West Virginia's perspective, that's where they struggled. You know, their first 11 was great. It's getting into that second, third unit that really challenges you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely depth has been a struggle. But even, the next few years, they're going to have to ride the hell out of the transfer portal. That is the only way they're going to get back up to, a good level. And they've had a couple of misses so far. I think it's safe to say now Emory Jones was a miss out of the portal. They've had a few good players they hit on. Daniel Grishik, I think, has been a really good player at linebacker. Xavier Henderson has had spurts here and there where he looks like that high-level Cowboy player that they thought they were getting, who transferred from Florida. But yeah, I think you're right, Keenan. I think depth-wise, they've got a long way to go to have to where your second and third level guys can play at this level, because I think a lot of them are not at this level for sure at this point.
Offensively, is this a team that's going to ride Corey Kiner? Are they going to try to run the football? I mean, that's their bread and butter, right?
That's been the one consistent. I think it was one of the questions you asked me this week. They went into the season wanting to do a lot of RPOs, a lot of run pass option, and they still do that to an extent. But yes, the one consistent thing on offense has been that running game. And that says a lot because they've had the two guys behind Corey Kiner, Miles Montgomery and Ryan Montgomery, have been injured a lot this season. And so that has really, I think, messed with that. Corey Kiner's at his shoulder, a large part of that load. But you're talking about a guy who was a former top 100 player. He was Mr. Ohio football a couple years ago. This is a guy who a lot of people expected to be playing at a high level. He's shown spurts of it. Even he's not consistent, I think, as he can be, as he needs to be. But yes, overall, I think that is the one consistent part of that offense for sure.
So let's switch over to defense. Coach Brown mentioned the big number 2 in the middle, wreaking havoc, and also the whole defensive group as a whole. What are you seeing from that group, and what do you expect to see on Saturday?
Yeah, Dante Corleone, that nose tackle they have. I think he's probably the most NFL ready player on that roster, offense or defense. You're talking about a massive guy at nose tackle, and that's what you have to have if you're going to run that 3-man front. They didn't really do that under Luke Fickell, so he has seen a lot more double teams this year, and I think that's made it a lot harder for him. You're not seeing him having the statistical numbers he did last season, even though I think he probably has been just as effective because he is, maintained that pass rush for Cincinnati. Him and Juwan Briggs up front, Eric Phillips also I would put in there as well. But it's been a lot more challenging, I think, for him for sure. And then, the secondary, really past that defensive front, Deshaun Pace is the key to the rest of that defense, right? He's that hybrid star player, that like linebacker safety position. So I think a couple of times, this is a guy who's a senior. He's one of the few holdovers from that college football playoff run a couple of years ago. But I think he's been in his own head a little bit. He got suspended for a game earlier in the season. I guess at this point, I don't mind telling you guys, apparently he had a blow up with one of the coaches, and that was this team infraction. That's what we had been told. So I think it speaks though to, again, if he can control his emotions, which has been the case for a lot of his career at Cincinnati, he also has the talent. I think somebody may take a flyer on him. If he doesn't get drafted, he's going to get signed somewhere. But Ivan Pace's brother, who has had a pretty good career so far with the Vikings, also went undrafted. Those guys were really a good 1-2 punch last season. But yeah, I think between Corleone and Deshaun Pace, those are really the two guys who really look for in that defense.
That's a unit that's still playing really hard, though, right? I mean, defensively, they've made it difficult on teams.
They've gotten worn down towards the second half of games. If you look, a lot of times they're in it in the first half. Oklahoma State's a great example of that. It was 10-7 at halftime before that thing got out of hand in the second half. So, again, I think a lot of it, they're just getting worn down. And then going back to the issue you brought up earlier, Keenan, with depth, they don't quite have the depth. They're not going that far on that depth chart. Not that you normally would, but you got usually a few guys you can bring in for a few more spells. And I think they're Derek Shepard is a good nose, a good substitute there for Corleone to give him a breather. But top to bottom, they don't have that depth. And I think you're really seeing that in a lot of games, again, especially like Oklahoma State, where that really got out of hand second half. But yeah, pretty much all season, even the ones they've lost, they've been in it in most of the first half. They've been in it, I think, every game, and none of them have really gotten away from them. But they get worn out, they get worn down, and it shows, and the scoreboard shows that by the end of it.
You mentioned the rivalry angle to this, and you can't force a rivalry. Obviously, it has to happen over time. These two teams, traded blows, back in the mid 2000s. But how are the fan base? How's the fan base responding to this? Are they excited to see this game back on the schedule? You think quite a few of them will make it to Morgantown? Do you think this has, I guess, at least the seeds to develop into a game that both these fan bases really care about?
Yeah, this season, it's okay. As far as tomorrow goes, or Saturday this weekend, I don't know how many are going to be making that trip. And you're talking about a 3-7 team after all. I mean, the bowl game is way out. That's gone. So you really don't have anything to play for. But this is the closest game for either school, in conference wise. So I think going forward, as long as both of them are competitive, and I think Cincinnati is going to get better. Whether that means they just get to a bowl the next season or two, I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna see them get back to that level they were the last couple of years for a little bit. I mean, I don't see anything that's letting me think they're gonna get anywhere close to that level. But as far as this rivalry goes, going back to your question, proximity wise, I think is a lot to do with it. Familiarity from the Big East. And again, I know it's a different sport, but because Bob Huggins was there for so long, I mean, that guy's still so revered in Cincinnati. They love him in Cincinnati. I think that has added something to it. And had Bob Huggins still been there, which I guess would have been the case, I think just across the board, that would have made a big difference in every sport because you have that tie between the two schools. So I think a lot of factors are going to make this a rivalry. I think it will become one, but I think it's got a ways to go before we're officially talking about it as a rivalry game.
A quick question back to defense. These two teams play a similar offensive style, a dual threat quarterback that likes to run and a team that likes to pound the football. Do you think that's beneficial to the Cincinnati defense?
Yes and no. Like I said, they've been shuffling a lot of guys in and out in the secondary. Jordan Young, another one of those transfers, has been really, really inconsistent. Another guy who I think has gotten into his own head a little bit. Raekwon Adkins got the start over him last week. And, I'll be no offense to Raekwon Adkins, but that shouldn't happen. Jordan Young should have that spot locked down, and he has not done it. He just hasn't been consistent. And then you got cases like Brian Threats at safety. There's another one who he should have that locked down, and he does some stupid stuff. He got thrown out of the game 2 weeks ago. Early on, it was like second drive of the game for a late hit, and he made contact with the official. You can't do that. Like those are just mental mistakes that you just can't do. But that's indicative of a 3-7 team. Like those are the kind of mistakes that you're making. Those are the kind of things that happen that explain why this team is 3-7, even though they're leading a lot of statistical categories. So back to your question, I don't know how it compares to that offense. They've seen a pretty wide array of offenses so far this season. The only one they really, I would say, looked really, really good against were Pitt and Houston. I throw the Eastern Kentucky game out of the window because that's an FCS team, but they stymied those two offenses. Pitt has turned out not to be great. They've had a couple of wins, including Thursday night against BC, but they made Donovan Smith look not good with Houston. So if they can do that this weekend, if they can replicate that, I think they'll do all right. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Because like I said, they've just been wildly inconsistent. And they get worn down, they make mental mistakes, and they just add up, and that's why they're 3-7.
You mentioned the concerns, with Scott Satterfield moving forward, but what's it say about this team that they didn't have anything to play for and go on the road and beat a Houston team that was trying to get into a bowl? I mean, it's got to at least be a positive for the program moving forward.
Yeah, I think it is. He was a little more chipper coming off that win, as it should be. I mean, it's 7 losses in a row. What do you say at that point? Like, I don't know. He doesn't At least he's not saying. If he knows, I mean, he doesn't know the answer. I will say that. If he does, then they wouldn't have a 7-game losing streak. Wouldn't have had a 7-game losing streak. So, yeah, for morale, I think it does a lot. At least keeping some interest, getting that first Big 12 win, even though it was a former American Athletic Conference member in Houston. Like you said, yeah, it was. I mean, Houston, was still very much in contention for a bowl at that point. So yeah, it's definitely a morale booster. I think it's some positive. It shows again when they're hitting on all cylinders, they can be a really good team. They just haven't put it all together. But again, twice this season, really, not counting that first FCS game.
I've asked you this one before, but I think it's critical here as well. What does Cincinnati need to do if they want to win this game on both sides of the ball? And, how do you see this one playing out on the road?
Well, I think offensively, Emory Jones has to make better decisions. They're gonna. I mean, they've been doing the last couple games. They're gonna swap out between he and Lichtenberg. I very few instances in college football history, really just football history, can you point to where saying that swapping quarterback in and out, in and out, in and out has worked. There's a few times it has, but not many. I don't think that's the case this season. I think they need to cut bait with Emory Jones and Mook. If you really think Brady Lichtenberg is the answer going forward, you got 2 games left in the season to try him out, see how he's going to do, and see whether he's your guy for next season or not. Holding on Emory Jones with a bowl gone, I don't see how that helps you at all. So knowing that Emory Jones is probably going to be the guy they continue to lean on, he needs to have better decision-making, needs to make good decisions in and around the red zone. Corey Kiner needs to get going for that running game. And then defensively, yeah, I think it starts up front. They got to have that good pass rush between Corleone and Briggs and Phillips. But Corleone and Briggs are your main 2. Malik Van, occasionally. And then Deshaun Pace. It really comes down to him. He's all over the field. Like, that guy's a ball hawk. He's not quite what his brother was. His brother was a tackling machine last few seasons. And I'm not surprised at all to see him do so well as he has with Vikings, even though he's undersized and everybody has doubted that guy. And that's one of the hardest working guys I've ever seen covering collegiate sports. So yeah, I think Deshaun Pace needs to be smart. He needs to show that ball hawking ability, and they just need to make good decisions. They need to stop making the mental mistakes and stop making the dumb mistakes that have, again, plagued them for a lot of this season.
Well,
Jason, thank you very much. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks, guys.
That was Jason's thoughts. My thoughts on this one, I'll make it short and sweet. West Virginia not only will win this game, they have to win this game. It's not often that a coach at 6-4 that was picked 14th in the preseason is, I don't want to say on the hot seat, but at least it's still bubbling a little bit with the way things have gone. This is a game you have to win at home. They're honoring Don Nehlen. I think West Virginia gets this done. It probably won't be as pretty as some fans like it. Something in the 31-24 range.
Yeah, all the arrows are pointing to where West Virginia has to get this done. Of course, against a lowly Cincinnati team, you gotta come out, play well at home, get to 5 wins at home, and take care of business. So I think West Virginia will win by 14. I was thinking somewhere like 35-17 or something like that. So that's the prediction I'll go with.
All right. Thanks for tuning in again to another edition of Musings from the Mountains.